draft in our.
I sent it moments ago.
Good morning. Today is Thursday, March 10th, 2026, here in House Transportation. We have on the Zoom Patrick Murphy from the Agency of Transportation, and we have Damian Leonard in the chair, our alleged counsel. We're going to spend the next hour and a half continuing to work on the language mileage-based user fee. Maybe less, maybe more, but you were just going to say there is a new draft version.
There is 3.2. I sent it to Gabby about 5 minutes ago, so I don't know if she's had it. Okay. It should be on the website. It's dated this morning at 7 a.m. And I want to thank Patrick Murphy for working through the night with me on this. So he looks I thought I worked late hours, and then I got his replies when I woke up this morning. So I'm very grateful for that help. So I'll walk you through what I've got, and it includes changes that were discussed yesterday. Hopefully they're pretty close, but let me know if additional work needs to be done. And let's see. Okay, great. It's up on the screen. So the first is in the statement of purpose. The highlighted language here shortens up the whole bit about roughly equivalent to things and just says to ensure that battery electric vehicles contribute to the transportation fund in an amount that reflects the annual miles traveled by each vehicle.
Bang.
All right. That's a good start. The next change you'll find on page 2, the mileage reporting period. So yesterday, if you remember, as we were talking, it became clear that the agency had envisioned a pay-as-you-go option being a potential option down the line, and the language in the bill didn't reflect that. So you're going to see several changes that try to enable that. This is the first. So it adds, with respect to a pay-as-you-go mileage-based user fee program established pursuant to subsection 4303B, the time period between a required report of the mileage shown on the vehicle's odometer and the most recent prior required report. So that's envisioning that the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles, if the capability arises, could start allowing for a pay-as-you-go program where folks are giving an odometer reading every month or every quarter, or something like that. And Patrick can speak more to that later.
Oh, yeah, it's just,
Or now.
yeah, Patrick, I was just wondering, it says, most, required report. So do you envision, like, I can sign up, I want to do a pay as I go, and therefore, let's say it's monthly, I have to take a screenshot or however it is. And I don't report every month necessarily, I'm lazy. I just worry about the term required report. I mean, can you speak to that?
Sure. So somebody electing to do for the record, Patrick Murphy, State Policy Director for the Agency of Transportation. Somebody electing to pay as you go wouldn't necessarily have to do it on a consistent frequency. I mean, the intent there is to be able to, more closely reflect when miles are incurred and then to be able to pay if that's the choice. And so if somebody is not consistent in their reporting and, does it in spurts, then that just gets reconciled at the point of registration. Damien, could you pull that language back up?
So it's C. And
so the required report in this, Damien, correct me if I'm wrong, but the required report in this is still the annual inspection odometer reading.
So the the reason I added this definition was because we already have that definition. And the idea here was that I was using mileage reporting period also for with the pay-as-you-go program. So say I filed a report every 30 days, and it may be that you just say a report of the mileage shown and the most recent prior report, because the idea was that the way I drafted it was that you would file your report with the commissioner, and once you file the report, the commissioner is going to calculate the fee, and then you can pay the fee. So that if you want to do, again, when we get to the program, you'll see there's a lot of discretion for the commissioner to set periods and so forth and other terms and conditions. So maybe it's just taking out the words required in two places there, because it was intended to capture that period that's less than the full annual reporting period.
I'm not trying to nitpick it, I just
Yeah,
nitpick.
but would it make sense to take out required in the two spots there and just
Yeah.
Patrick?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that was confusing to me.
Okay, great. I'll take that out.
Representative Keiser and then Representative White.
Talk about nitpicking, just wait. So, and unfortunately, this is going into my business background, but what I'm envisioning is you could have somebody as pay as you go. You'd have periods where you'd have your mileage that would be part of a statement, so to speak. This is how many miles you go, and then I give you $600, and then I would, on a budget type of payment, or in my own budget, I'd send you $25 a month. And so every month or something like that, we would have an online system, not a paper system, online system where you could go and see your transactions. Is that even reached? Anyway, I'm thinking of a budget account for any type of
So I
fuel.
think that's more like doing monthly installments for the annual period.
Well, yeah, whatever. We're talking about somebody that is like, I got to send you $50,
Yeah.
And so what you would have is you'd have a list of transactions, and I'm sorry, I'm getting way in the weeds, but so I think it would be easier for the consumer to understand it if they got it all on a, you'd see all the transactions. So you'd have a MBUF bill, and you might have a $10 payment, you might have a $15, and then you have a statement amount that is due or credit. You might even bill a credit.
Yeah.
I can answer that. So Representative Keiser,
Patrick.
the intent is to work within the MyDMV online system so that people would be able to have essentially an account where they can view their transactions, they can have the records of the odometer readings, and that's why yesterday we talked about like the ability to get rid of some of the older sections around records retentions and that sort of thing, because it will be contained within an account that someone can access themselves.
Thank you, Patrick.
Sure.
And I'm just wondering, in section C, if we want to have language that says something about annual, because isn't the expectation that you're either getting your mileage checked at your annual inspection, or you're doing some type of pay-as-you-go system within the year? But isn't the expectation that you're doing this at least like minimal on an annual basis?
So when we get to the PAYGO system,
Dig into that more.
we'll dig into that more, but this was intended to capture the intermittent
Okay.
or interim payments. And maybe I should just leave it out of this definition and explain this in that section. But this was intended to capture those interim payments. What it came down to is I was trying to simplify the language that I had to use in the statute, but I think I may have complicated things more. Maybe when we've gone through the pay-as-you-go system, let me know if you think it just makes sense to use different words.
Yeah, maybe just stop it at the comma there. Because if we're going to go into more detail further down. with respect to pay-as-you-go mileage-based user fee program established pursuant to subsection 430B of this chapter.
That wouldn't define what the period is though. So I'd just delete the whole subdivision. Because it would just, that's just telling you what it's referring to. And it's basically saying this definition only refers to that fee program or this portion of the definition. So,
I'll refer to you on that.
yeah. So, but yeah, if it comes to it, we can take this out. So I will come back to that. Terminating event, we looked at this language yesterday. Oh, I'm sorry, I got to pull it back up on the screen. It's just highlighted because the editors hadn't looked at it yet. So when we get to the mileage-based user fee, I've made a number of changes here, so bear with me. So the first is the annual mileage-based user fee language is the same as what we saw yesterday for the most part. I've added except as otherwise provided pursuant to subsections B and C of this section to address pay-as-you-go and newly registered vehicles, which we hadn't addressed in yesterday's language. And we'll get to those in a second. The other change here is I took the payment requirements and I brought them up into this subsection because now that we have multiple programs, it was getting confusing as to what payment requirements applied when, or multiple, not programs, but options within the program. So pay-as-you-go option is subsection B. And Patrick can talk a little bit more about the background to this, but what this would provide is that the commissioner, in the commissioner's discretion, could establish a pay-as-you-go mileage-based user fee program that owners or lessees may opt into in lieu of paying the annual mileage-based user fee. So in other words, instead of at the end of each year getting this bill and then having to figure out, I'm going to pay it lump sum or in quarterly or monthly installments, you can pay as you go and then true up at the end of the year. So what they would do is they would report the mileage shown on their odometer. And this says at times in a manner required by the commissioner. That leaves a lot of discretion to the commissioner as to how you would report. And I think it leaves enough room for the commissioner to say potentially that you can report as you want to, and then at the end of the year when you get your inspection, we true up and you get billed for whatever you haven't paid for. And then as soon as practicable, after receiving the report, commissioner would calculate the applicable mileage-based user fee and mail the registered owner or lessee a statement of the amount. And remember, mail includes notice on my DMV and email. And then the owner or lessee would remit the full amount due to the commissioner within not more than 30 days after the assessment. This was a placeholder, so this language can change. I just put something in because I wasn't sure what was wanted here and it was quite late. Following each annual inspection for a BEV enrolled in the program, the commissioner would determine if the actual miles traveled were greater than or less than the miles reported during that time period. If the actual mileage was less than the owner, than the amount reported. So for example, maybe there was an error with the reading of the odometer and they paid for miles that weren't actually on the odometer, something like that, they could receive a credit equal to the difference. And that credit would be applied to reduce the next amount due. And then if the actual mileage was greater, which is probably the more likely scenario, the owner or lessee would be assessed an amount equal to the difference, and the amount would be added to the next amount due from the owner. So essentially, you true up at the end of the year, and anything that you haven't paid for would go on to your next bill. Anything that you've overpaid for would be credited against your next bill. Patrick, do you want to speak to this a little bit more?
Just generally, that, you know, the idea is to make sure that we have language that would allow for this option, but not box us into having to provide this option if through the so that's why, you know, Damien noted some flexibility within that language is to just preserve that option, which we feel would be one of the more convenient ways to do it for people. And if we are able to implement that by January 2027 to be able to do that, but not necessarily to be directed to do that if it is not feasible within the time frame that we have.
So I would just have concerns in general. I think it should be a shall instead of a may.
Yeah.
I think that's gonna be cumbersome from a lot of Vermonters to come up with a registration fee and then plus the pay as you go all at once.
So, yeah.
So I think it has to. be
Well,
a
so
shall.
I
Yeah.
just want to clarify that, and we haven't gotten to this section, so I
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from. Even if there is not a pay-as-you-go system where there is the self-reporting of the driver of their odometer readings through photo capture, there would still be the ability to pay on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis on a frequency that the user selects once enrolled in the program.
Okay, and that's a shall or
That's a shall.
that's okay.
Yeah, that is,
That-
yeah.
Yeah,
So this is more about the, you know, technical ability of the system to be able to handle photo capture from an individual user versus just being able to take an estimated payment and, you know, distribute that across 12 months of the year. That part of it, the latter part, is what would be required within this system.
Two things. One, I'm just, you know, is there any concern at all? I mean, because the programs aren't written yet, that they'll run in, like this is what we're talking about. Not quite sure we're gonna be able to pull that off. Are there any concerns? You know, are we getting the legislation before we find out how it can actually work? Is that an issue? The second thing is, do you envision BEV owners of, like, you know, being informed of this and then choosing something? I'm gonna choose monthly payments, and then therefore my DMV, you know, gives you an email at the end of the month or whenever. So that it's you know, not completely on the owner to, like, oh, it's the end of the month, I gotta send my payment. The two questions there, Patrick.
Yeah, sure. The first overall question, is there concern about like the ability to implement the program given the language that we have? No. We've tried to be as defined as possible so that you're comfortable with the direction of the program and how it will function, but to also be flexible enough for those various edge cases to come up for, you know, and Damien will point out these various sections where the commissioner has some discretion in being able to figure out how to handle those. So I think we're comfortable with our ability to implement, you know, what we are working with the vendor on right now is a specific scope of work about what this system must be able to do. And so there's lots of things in there that will handle all kinds of cases that we know will and have come up in other jurisdictions. So, you know, the second piece of it is, yes, there will be, you know, a big part of this grant and the implementation work is figuring out communications. And so somebody, you know, enrolling in the program will be able to select themselves what payment frequency or method they would prefer, and then they'd be able to based upon that selection, have, the regular communications and reminders to make sure that it's as convenient and easily accessible as possible.
Yeah, I mean, do you envision sort of, I sign up and it asks me, how many miles a year do you think you're gonna drive? And I put, I don't know, 12,000. And then it says, okay, and then, I start my monthly payments. Because you're gonna have to come up with an estimate, I guess, of how many miles. Will that be self-selected? And then, of course, you're trued up at the end at registration or inspection.
So what I was starting to talk about yesterday is that, once the system is built, we won't necessarily be able to access the historical data for the odometer readings. So if you've owned your vehicle, say, for 5 years, we won't necessarily be able to see what those inspection reporting periods showed for odometer readings. DMV is able to see that data, but the system itself won't be able to automatically, base payments off of those historical data points. So, but in the future, after you've sort of passed your first cycle with the program, then you would be able to have sort of a more finely tuned number that you can base, monthly or quarterly or what have you payments off of. So it will eventually be drawing from the historical data within the system. So that if, you've traveled 12,000 miles in that first reporting period that is recorded within the system, then you would be able to, you'd get, something that maybe $165 or whatever is what your monthly payments are going to be based upon. But there's language in here that addresses the transition. I think it's in here. Damien and I had corresponded on this. For that first piece, it really has to be an estimate because we won't be able to draw automatically from the data there.
So my question is it the system that, even after it's going, is it the system that's gonna tell you what your monthly payment is? Or are you going to sign up for, based on mileage or based on, a 1/12 of what you expect at the end? Who's gonna decide what that monthly payment is?
Yeah,
going to be?
So right now I think it's written as, it's based on the average vehicle going the average number of miles, which is about 11,000 miles. There may be flexibility within the system to at least, have some thresholds in there. If somebody is self-selecting that amount, that there's at least, a floor and
Right.
and maybe a ceiling as well. So you're not getting somebody to input something wrong and then they're invoiced a far too high amount over time.
Maybe they put in a yearly amount in the monthly.
Yeah, something like that. So there's
that would be good.
there is an ability within the system, I believe, that sort of will check for those, like very high or very low amounts.
But again, is it the user or the system that will tell you what if you choose monthly payments, what it will be?
As it's written right now, the first sort of year, the first upon enrollment, it would be determined by the system.
Okay.
There's a question out here.
So, I think a lot of us probably use monthly withdrawal from our checking account that, for like my cell phone. They will email me and tell me, on Tuesday, whatever amount is going to be withdrawn to pay my bill. Is that what you envision this pay to go? model to be like? Or is this something that the person that is paying, like me, the driver, is going to physically have to monthly go in and report, well, I traveled 100 miles this month and put in the figure? Or if you're saying, okay, we're gonna base this pay as you go on, let's say 11,000 miles a month, and calculate each month's pay, it's the same amount every month, and the person needs to know for themselves that they have to take this out of their checking account and pay DMV?
So,
Trying
so
to-
there may be two options, and there would be two options allowable under this language. The first, that Representative Corcoran was getting at earlier is that you would be able to, pay on a monthly basis. You'd get these, consistent reminders about it's, this, whatever time of the month, here is the invoice. And so it wouldn't be something that's like a big burden to the user to be able to pay. It's be, more akin to one of your utility bills. There is, with this language that Damien just went into, the pay-as-you-go system, there may be people who would prefer to pay only exactly the amount of miles that they've gone. And for that, they would, essentially have to take an odometer reading themselves through, the use of like a mobile phone, taking a picture, and then loading that to the system and entering in their mileage and paying through that method. So it's, maybe more onerous for some, but that is why it would only be an option. It wouldn't be like the required method.
Okay, so there's no option that if you're basing it on an annual amount of 11,000, having in mind following year you will true up, that it's just an automatic, that instead of just sending an invoice every month, you tell the person, it's due and we're gonna take, withdraw from whatever account you want it to be withdrawn from, and it's paid. The person is actually going to have to wait to get the invoice and pay from the invoice like you do for your electric utility bill.
Yeah, that's a question I have to run by the vendor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I mean, I think it would be easier if that would be an option to just, hey, your bill is due in 10 days and, we're taking $100 out of your account, be ready. I don't know.
Yeah, I will follow up with the vendor on
Okay.
that question.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Representative Coe?
Two more, and I realize, we're trying to figure this out, and we haven't written the program completed yet. But, I worry of, I don't know, somebody, retired person who only drives 3,000 or 4,000 miles a year, getting a monthly payment as if they drive 12,000 a year, and getting ahead. That's one thing. We want to make sure it doesn't happen. And the other thing is it really necessary to self-report by taking a photo and trying to uplift it? That's pain in the neck for me. I can imagine from everybody else. I'm not sure why I can't just say, tell us what your odometer is, and you fill it out and off you go. And if you're not telling the truth or whatever, it's going to be trued up at the end. But that, to self-report in those monthly times or quarterly times, it seems like you ought to just be able to say, what's your mileage? If you want to upload a photo, fine, we'll do it for you. But you self-report, because at some point at the inspection, you're going to have, a real record and reconciliation to happen.
Yeah, I understand the point. It would be, if provided, just an option and not a requirement. But I think the idea behind the photo capture is to actually help avoid what would be an inconvenient mistake. So if people entered their amounts in wrong, or, so there is the technology where if you both upload the photo, it helps to validate the data that's been entered, or if they don't correspond, to, be able to notice that person, that there may be an error in what you've entered, so that you're not
Right, but
overpaying
you're already gonna have mistake proofing in the program, right? So if I put 12,000 miles and I meant to put 1,200, I assume it's gonna go, whoa, hey, this is, way above what's expected, or way below.
Sure.
You're
Yeah.
on negative. So you're gonna have that mistake proofing. There's other things. I have to go out and take a picture of my registration, get my Oyster license. I gotta take a picture of my registration, take a picture of this, take a picture of that, upload it all. And it takes, a long time, and it just doesn't work very well. I can't imagine having to go out in the middle of the winter and take a picture of my odometer just to pay a bill. Just seems like
Well, so
more than.
just as a
than
reminder,
needed.
this is an option that people could choose if they wanted to, that, they prefer not to pay on a consistent basis, or not to pay upfront. And if you're paying as you go, like you just ended the trip, you're already in the vehicle, you just take a picture of the odometer and then you pay, like, these are the miles I've gone. I understand your point that not everybody will find that convenient, and that's why it is just an option.
Yeah, I think Representative Couch brings up a good point in that it reminds me, there are people who really kind of struggle with technology. And so I think it will be important that the DMV has a clear phone number for people to reach out for assistance and try to figure out things like this. I imagine with their new system and that they will be set up for that, but I just think that will be an important part of the communicating the mileage-based user fee as it is unrolled to the public. And my second point I wanted to bring up, and I did bring this up earlier in the week, is this program clearly is requiring electric vehicles to get their annual inspection. And so I'm suggesting that we look at requiring annual inspections upon being able to re-register your car, which then addresses the combustion engine cars out there and the percentage of cars that we think are not getting inspected. I know that inspections are being looked at and reevaluated in the building already, but it just seems to be, if EVs are going to be required to get annual inspections, let's make sure all cars are required to get their annual inspections.
Let's move on.
Okay. So, we get back into it. This is part of the transition that Patrick was talking about. What I realized this morning, when I got Patrick's feedback, was that I didn't include the transition to address sort of what happens with all of the funny cases with cars that are currently EVs that are currently registered and have paid the infrastructure fee and are going into this program, and how are we going to address that? So there will need to be a section in here separate from the statute that kind of addresses how you roll into the program if you have a currently registered EV. This subsection addresses newly registered EVs. So it would propose to assess upon registration a mileage-based user fee equal to the rate, the per mile rate multiplied by the average annual vehicle miles traveled, and then require payment in the same way that you do for the annual mileage at that point. So either a lump sum or a quarterly or monthly installment payment of that. So this, I believe yesterday, it's roughly 11,000 miles. So it's roughly $154 at the current time. And this, if people's travel went down, this would probably change. If people's travel went up, it could change. You could also set a fixed amount. And then upon completion of that first mileage reporting period, then you would basically true that amount up and either receive a credit if you traveled fewer miles or receive a bill for the remaining balance if you traveled more miles. So this is requiring a mileage payment upfront for the year if you have a newly registered EV. Questions? Okay. The next changes in here are just renumbering of sections here because I added the 2 new subsections and moved some other pieces around. And then I've consolidated the mileage-based user fee rate and then the annual adjustment language. I know there was a lot of discussion about that the other day about whether to keep that in. It's still in this draft because I didn't have a clear direction from the committee discussion as to whether it was coming out or not. But that's in as subdivision 2 of this section. And it's unchanged from what was there before, but that's still there.
Sorry, to go back a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm trying to digest.
Sure.
A brand new vehicle that's just being registered, that's page 5, right?
Yeah.
So are we saying I get bought a brand new vehicle, I register it, and I gotta pay my fee
Yes.
for a whole year
That's what this is
before I
proposing.
drive?
That's what this is proposing,
That doesn't
yes.
seem right. I don't pay my gas tax when I register my vehicle. The whole idea of monthly payments, or, it's after you've driven, then you read the mileage and you pay. This is saying I'm gonna pay $160 added to my registration, and I haven't driven a mile. Doesn't seem fair. And that's the whole purpose of the mileage-based user fee in mind, is to be fair. Electric vehicles pay their fair share. But paying upfront is not fair. Again, somebody
So-
who's retired and only drives 3,000 miles a year now is gonna pay $140 for a year and then get trued up, I guess, at the end and get a check back. Patrick.
Yeah, thank you. So the intent is not for it to be necessarily paid up front. So I just want to clarify that, and I don't know, Damien, if that's what you're actually seeing in the language, but the other sections would allow for as with any vehicle, regardless of its age, would allow for the ability to space payments out on a quarterly or monthly basis. So right now, what electric vehicle owners are paying is $89 at the point of registration. And they're essentially paying ahead for what their mileage is estimated or expected to be. And when the legislature adopted the $89, it was with the understanding that for the vast majority, it wouldn't necessarily be exactly $89. Some will be lower, but some will be higher and maybe a lot higher. So there needs to be some way to sort of estimate out how you would pay on a monthly or quarterly basis. And it has to be based on some number. You don't have any historical data, of course, with a new vehicle. And so, it's obviously a question for the committee to decide what that number should be. But what we've included in the language is what people on average are paying, for gas vehicles traveling the average number of miles in a year.
Representative McCoy and then White and then Lally.
So I think they have to begin paying something. They will always be behind, so they can't go the whole year driving 11,000 miles and then get assessed fees. So if we can rework the wording that we have in the prior section about somebody who currently has an EV, it's a guesstimate based on 11,000 miles, and you have a choice of paying as you go or paying quarterly or paying monthly or however you do it. So I guess that option should be given to the driver picking up his brand new EV. You will be assessed a mileage-based user fee based on 11,000 miles your first year. Would you like to pay it now, or would you like to choose to pay quarterly or monthly or pay as you go your exact mileage? Somehow word that in this section for a brand new EV. But I don't think, I mean, they do have to pay something. I don't want to have a whole year go by. So offer the same plans as we are offering anyone else driving an EV.
So,
And that, I mean, then you don't, if you choose not to, you don't want to pay the whole thing up front, and I get that. I mean, you are literally driving a car out of the lot and haven't driven a mile. But you know you're going to be assessed 11,000 miles a year. You can pay as you go or pay for it.
just to be clear, the monthly and quarterly is in here. The pay-as-you-go option is not, but that's an easy change. So,
Representative White.
I agree with both Representative Couch and Representative McCoy. I mean, I think it's unfair to assess a full annual amount at the point of registration or purchase. I think that, you know, laying out the options and maybe they're paying the first quarterly payment. Because if they are someone who drives much less, you know, fewer miles, paying that 11,000, and again, if they're income sensitive, that seems like that could be onerous. But paying the first quarter and then they're being able to self-attest or whatever to pay subsequently. I agree it should be something. I don't think it should be the annual cost at you know the point of purchase / registration.
Representative Lally and then you.
I'm just wondering if a potentially simple solution to this would be to just have the starting point be the infrastructure fee that everybody is accustomed at this point to be paying. And that would be the that amount would be your beginning point for the mileage-based user fee. So it would be frictionless in that sense. People are already accustomed to paying this. And then that would set the foundation, and then we would add on from there. So we would be getting revenue in a nice chunk of it that we need to compensate for the heavier weight of these cars and their impacts on our roads. So that might be just sort of a way to start this whole thing off. Everybody gets that right now. And that also addresses Rep. Couch, your concern, which I think is very valid. We have, you know, many retired people in this state who are probably only driving, you know, pretty low mileage, particularly a lot of people. If they have an EV, it's their sort of like little running errands locally car, you know, and so it's likely that they may never exceed that that infrastructure fee, but they're used to paying it right now. And that seems like a kind of, you know, a fair and fairly simple thing to do. Because if you are like, okay, we're not doing this, we're going to do this other thing, and it's just, you know, and you have to understand it, and it's I think this might be an easy way to just sort of like shift this all over. And the other thing I was kind of wondering about is the writing is sort of on the wall that eventually this is maybe the best way to go for everybody. So I was wondering if, you know, we could have some discussion at some point about maybe a phase 2 of this whole thing. I'm getting out over my skis on this, I admit, but an MBUF option for everybody so that we can start to, people like myself who drive a combustion engine car, but are thinking about maybe an EV for the next one or something like that, could start to transition over. We'd probably get more, honestly, probably get more revenue out of me by having me on the MBUF thing. That would be something just to explore, actually.
You might have just killed the bill if you.
Not to put it now, but just like thinking ahead, and
Yeah.
I just find this sort of like parallel system kind of a little bit messy. So.
So we represent Couch.
Yeah, I agree. On a prepayment of some type seems reasonable, but I just want to make sure, at some point, monthly or quarterly, I get a chance to sort of true up and say, hey, guess what? I'm not driving that many miles. You still have credit. And then, you go to a point where now you owe based on your monthly or quarterly or end of year report.
That's in the language. Yeah.
So I would offer, Representative, thank you. Who's being planned? Yeah, which was Ken first?
You can go, yeah.
Thank you. Now where'd I go?
You're here in room 40.
I yield to Representative Wells.
There you go. Well done.
Thank you, Representative Kuzer. Just a comment, you just bought a $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000 car, and then you're gonna cry over $154. Just extra red tape, just charge them the 154, move on. It's a better free pass for 10 years anyway, not running those heavy trucks and cars that are wrecking our roads worse than those smaller weighted vehicles. Don't even give them the option. 154, pay up. You had a free ride for a decade. Move on. You just paid $44,000 for that new electric vehicle. Pay the 154, dude.
I got it.
All right.
So,
Trace that.
yeah, so maybe 60,000, a little bit more than the 24,000 I heard advertised, but point is that if you put 11,000 miles or whatever the number is on this account, it's just there. And then pay as you go, I've got this in my head, I'm sorry, but if you send some money in, that just works that amount down. And we're not talking about penalties on not paying that, right?
The pay as you go.
Not pay as you go. I'm saying so I get assessed 11,000 miles when I register that car. And I'm not paying anything because I'm driven it. But we're going to have a statement that says you're a new owner, you have 11,000 miles on this account. In other words, you have this MBUF that's 11,000 miles. And it's just there. It's a budget payment, if you think of it like that, or whatever. And you throw $10 a month at it. And then at your inspection, you find you only get 5,000 miles. And then there's a reconciliation, just as we talked about. Just so long as there's no penalties or interest or anything involved in that first year. Anyway, that was my concept.
I hate to get bogged down on this fairness thing, considering the obvious thing, you've heard me say it over and over again, when you drive out of state, it's not fair. So I guess kind of ironic that we're getting bogged down on fairness when the whole thing's not fair if you're driving out of state. So.
Representative Thomason.
Actually, just building on Rep. Casey's point, I was curious if the agency considered any, I understand it's pretty costly and there's surveillance concern or privacy concerns. But was there ever considered an option for if folks want to utilize some type of monitor to track, what their in-state versus out-of-state mileage is? Or could that be offered? Could there be more exploration to offer that at some point in the future, particularly if we were to roll out more broadly? What are the options there?
Yeah, so we did a lot of work in the fall of 2021 with stakeholder groups, with surveys of almost 400 different Vermonters, many of whom owned EVs at the time. There were a lot of privacy concerns around that. There were also cost-effective concerns. So the technology that has been piloted elsewhere has quite high administrative costs. Some programs aren't even generating net revenues from those. Others are, 40% administrative costs. The plug-in devices that are used in some cases quite high. There's a number of issues with that, and then who bears that cost? Is it the user? Is it the state, or some combination of the two? Either way, the net revenues to the transportation fund are substantially lower, and especially with the smaller volume of participants. And then you've got, a number of challenges with telematics right now. Of not every, there's just high costs that come with that, and so some of the states that have piloted this are moving away from the plug-in devices as an example. What we do intend to do is to continue to look at what can be used in the future, and cost may come down through the use of telematics. There may be developments that allow for more sort of open sharing of the data that comes from the automakers. There's ways that this program can evolve, and I think it's important to recognize that this is just it's a first phase. We're not saying that the system is perfect, but it could evolve over time to allow for the option of somebody to report in any sort of method that was allowed, and that it's reduced privacy concerns because people are electing to do that. What we're building right now is the ability to just receive data from whatever the reporting source, receive data and be able to bill for a mileage-based user fee rate that has been set by you all. And the whole point, just to address a couple of questions or comments that have come up in the last few minutes, the whole point of this has been to make a fairer system. It's to move toward something where more vehicles are paying something closer to what all the other vehicles are paying. So there's some parity on a per mile basis to the impacts that the infrastructure is experiencing. So it is, the legislature chose to impose a flat fee on EV owners. We did, through that road usage charge study back in 2021, see that the flat fee is not the fairest system. You do have many people who are driving much less, many who are driving many more miles. And so it's not a true user pay model, just as the gas tax right now is not a perfect system. It's not a fair system. It's not necessarily reflective of the actual impacts and the miles that you travel. So that's why we proposed the mileage-based user fee in the first place, to get closer to that fairer system and to kind of move away from the flat fee model.
Thanks for that, Patrick. And I just want to say I'm encouraged to hear that it sounds like the agency will be continuing to monitor what options are available and how the technology is evolving in terms of cost and other concerns, because it seems like that would be useful to keep checking back in on as an option for folks who do drive significant mileage on the state. Thanks.
Yes, and just lastly, that is a part of our grant work as well. So after the system is implemented in January, it's not, we don't just kind of wrap up. We're evaluating how the initial implementation worked. What have we learned so far? We're discussing options with other jurisdictions, and then, to Representative Lally's point, we are developing for that grant a possible transition strategy that would be delivered to FHWA by the end of the grant, I think in September of 2028. So, this is a first step towards what we think is a fairer system. We know it's not perfect, but appreciate some of the concerns that have been raised.
Thanks.
Okay, so I don't, just on the mileage-based user fee for newly registered vehicles. I hear still discussion about what the appropriate fee is. I heard some folks who would support the 154, others who support the 89. Shall I leave it as is for now until the next draft? And
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any decisions are gonna be made without that.
okay,
And I'm wondering if Patrick wanted to weigh in on Representative Lowry's suggestion of using that registration fee that EV owners are already paying, the infrastructure fee kind of out of the gate. And then transitioning, having the true up at a year and then transitioning, that seemed like a valid suggestion.
So that's partially what we've recommended, and I don't know whether that's yet reflected in the language that Damien's drafted just for this morning. But we did correspond last night about how the transition happens, where you have a number of different scenarios, and this is in response to Representative Pouch's request for some examples. So if it feels like a good time for the committee to have a little discussion of that, it might be helpful to sort of answer some of those questions that have been raised, and maybe that kind of.
Yeah, we can definitely transition there, but first Representative White has a question.
So I guess I'm assuming that the fee of $89 goes away when MBUF is put into place. Correct?
yes,
Okay. So I think the suggestion is, I wouldn't call it the fee. I guess I would call it your first payment on an MBUF. When you purchase the vehicle, you're going to be assessed $89 instead of $154. And then you true up when, at the end of the year? Or like, are you doing it quarterly, or because you're still going to be paying backward, like you're paying after the fact? At some point, you will always be paying after, because you're reporting quarterly on what you just wrote. Whereas gas tax is immediate, it's in real time.
But I think they still have the option to pay the 89, and then they can do the monthly, or even probably pay more if they want.
Correct, but just for that first transition period.
Yes.
Will they be truing up quarterly the first year? Or
Yeah.
are they gonna wait till the end of the year and then
The next
Yeah,
recorded
it-
event.
the next?
might be helpful for Patrick to share the chart that he created for this morning right now, because I think that addresses some of those questions about what an existing EV driver is going to do as they transition into this, because you're an existing EV owner, you've already paid your infrastructure fee in 2026. And possibly you've paid 2 years of infrastructure fee. And so how's that going to apply?
Right.
And so Patrick can walk you through that.
Can you see this okay?
Yes.
Okay. So this is it, as I said, in response to Representative Pouch's request for some examples. And so I tried to, I have not gotten into, the list will be far longer when the system is actually designed, of, the different things that could possibly happen. So I don't want to get bogged down in all those details, but do give you a sense of like, how will this be experienced by certain users. So Representative Burke is wanting to join. Yeah.
Oh.
So for the for someone who has an initial registration, say in September, and their inspection comes afterwards, before anything is implemented with the mileage-based user fee, and they have just a 1-year registration, I've laid out, okay, their next registration is going to be the following September in 27 when the program is live. Their inspection, though, doesn't happen until after that registration. And so there's not yet any mileage reporting data within the system. They've paid an $89 EV infrastructure fee in the fall of 2026 before the program's implemented, and so that just gets applied. It carries them through that first period. So they wouldn't experience the mileage-based user fee in full as an actual payment until their following inspection. Their following registration in September of 2028. Now, somebody on a 2-year registration, same thing, because their inspection still falls after the next registration, you don't have the full reporting data, and so they're credited for the EV infrastructure that they paid.
Patrick, I think we just a question from Representative Pouch.
So
Yeah, sorry.
thanks, Patrick, for doing this. I appreciate it. So in the first 2 instances, I've done my registration before the program starts. I've got an inspection with a number, but when do they actually start paying the mileage-based user fee? The next registration?
So,
20,
yeah, so
and that's when it kicks in?
So what they would, I've put options here because at that point in September of 2027, they'll then be able to pick, whether it's on a monthly, quarterly, or if they want to pay upfront, they will be able to do that, or a pay-as-you-go option. So there's there's any number of different ways it could look. Somebody might want to pay $154 up front. Other people might prefer to space it out and pay, $13 or something a month. Others, still might want to just be able to pay as they go, based on their, photo capture or the self-reporting method. So you're not necessarily going to see like a huge bill in that first year. What you'll see is options, and you'll be able to select those and then begin, paying either in the first month or, so the first slug of miles that you drive.
And so just follow up. So whether in these examples in September 27, or it could be 28, depending on, if I've got a 1 or 2 year, is it fair to say at those points, new registration, now your mileage-based user fee is kicking in, and there'll be probably some kind of upfront payment, but it's starting in September 27 is like, now we're starting. Is that?
That's right, yeah.
So
for the next reporting period. So
Right.
the actual, so that you won't see the first true up won't be till the following year when you
1 year from that registration.
if you're on a 1 year or 2 years, if you're on the other option.
And so in this case, the person who did the double registration gets a little advantage in that their mileage base won't start for a little bit longer. Is that fair? Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably reasonable. They paid up front too. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and then we don't get in this situation of issuing refunds based,
Right.
that does speak to sort of what Representative Lally was getting at. There are other situations that come up, like if somebody had the inspection and it preceded their registration, whether it's 1 month, these are just examples, but whether it's 1 month or several months. And then they were on a 2-year registration cycle, so that in that second year, there's still, you're now in the program is live. The DMV will have the data within the system for that second reporting period. And so you would just have the partial amount that was intended to be for the second year, the $89 essentially, that would be credited against whatever the actual miles were that somebody drove. I'm just pausing if there's any questions.
Dave?
A clarifying question, Patrick, do you see that credited amount being prorated? So I think the example you have here is that so what I'm seeing is I think 13 months. So a whole mileage-based user fee reporting period. So I guess that would be the full amount. But if it, say it was like 10 months before your next registration that are in your first reporting period, would you see that like prorated amount of that $89, like 10 of 12 months of it being applied against it, or just the full 89?
Just the full amount.
Okay.
We're trying to keep things as simple as possible. We don't want to get into range of formulas to determine where in their month they were, and that's in effect how the language right now in statute is for the EV infrastructure fee. It's just like it's not a registration fee. So if there's like a mid-year sale of the vehicle or what have you, it's not credited back to the registered vehicle's owner. So it's just a straightforward 89 fee for the first year, $89 fee for the second. And in this circumstance where we have data that exists within the system for that second year, it's just that full 89 would be credited against that.
Representative Quinn?
Why don't we just say at a certain point we stop the 2-year registration until so it's your registration. I know we'll have some in the system already, but between a certain point, like July 1 or something forward, it's a 1-year registration for EVs to get this thing. So we don't have to calculate out. And the driver of the vehicle goes, well, what am I paying? Am I paying? And I'm okay. I hear I'm supposed to be paying. And I don't know if I'm supposed to be paying. Is that something that you can just simply unclick or click a box? Any EV, it's now just a 1-year registration for the next year or two until everybody slides into the system and going forward. I don't know. It's just a thought. It seems pretty complicated, but maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just a thing in the system that it's gonna happen, and it's like all magic with the guy behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. Who knows? I don't know.
The Wizards?
So, sorry.
No, you go, we respond to that, Patrick.
So even if there was a desire to do that, which is not what we're proposing, you still, before just to take the first couple of lines of the spreadsheet, before the mileage-based user fee even takes effect, there's that those legacy questions that you'd have to deal with.
Yes.
The 2-year and the 2-year registration, and then just like where people are in their registration cycle versus their inspection cycle. And that's what I say. It's not going to be perfect, but the intent was to as Representative Lally mentioned, like to be able to just have people on a glide path, and it's not like January 1, everybody's enrolled in the program and paying. It's going to be based on, where people are in their various inspection periods and registration cycles.
Yep. We'll have
Are there-
less in that queue, I guess, is if we eliminate the 2-year, we'd have less people in that queue. But I don't know by how many, and maybe it's not even worth it, but. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Are there other questions on this, or should I just stop sharing?
Any other questions?
But can you send that to us so we can at least physically?
It's online, yeah.
It's online.
Yeah,
It's
it's on our
online,
website.
Thank you.
It's on our website.
It's still
No, you
not-
can take that down, Patrick.
Okay.
I guess. We're done.
It is still complicated. It helps a little bit. At least you can walk through it.
Well, I didn't have time to go through and, draw up icons and arrows and
Emojis, yeah.
give actual examples of, upstanding citizens like yourself, Representative Pouch, who pay on time, and then,
Yeah.
Representative Wells or whomever, but,
It's on the other end of this right now.
Yeah, that's a fact.
but if there are questions on it, just feel free to reach out after if they don't get answered during the testimony.
Are we done walking through the? or
Yeah.
we still have-
Yeah, there are a few more items in the bill. Back up.
On page 5.
Yep. Well, the rest should be a little quicker till we get to the end. So we're actually gonna move ahead to page 7. Go ahead and post it. Okay. So the first is I added the exemption for BEVs that are owned or operated by the United States. And then I just moved the language about the mileage-based user fee being in addition to any other taxes and fees to the very end, just as part of the cleanup. The next change is in the failure to file reports or pay fee when due and the penalty. So if you remember, there was a $10 late fee plus interest plus the 30-day late penalty. The $10 late fee, I think you asked to have come out yesterday. So that's out. The other interest and past due penalties are still in there. And the permission for the commissioner to waive any interest due if it's excusable neglect is in there. And that's a moderately broad term that allows the commissioner some discretion to take into account, like I was traveling overseas and my spam filter caught the emails from the department, or, but it also allows the commissioner discretion to say that's not really a reasonable excuse for not paying.
But again, even with all of this, even when you get to this point, they still can go in,
And register.
and void all this coverage, right?
Right, they can register, pay this money and so forth. This is basically if you go in at the end of the year and you say, if your mileage reporting period ends, you get the bill, you don't elect monthly payments, you don't pay the bill, you could get assessed interest and penalties. This is really a policy question for you. We do not do this for registration fees. We do this for the dealers and distributors of gas and diesel, but they're also, I think as one of the members said yesterday, they're sophisticated business entities with, bookkeeping and so forth. So there's a little difference. We do this for your, do something similar for like personal income tax and so forth. So it really becomes a policy question for you about what sort of penalties you want if folks are not paying.
Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to understand the difference between the penalty in subsection A and subsection B. A, failing to pay on time, which then will begin to accrue interest at 1.5%. That sounds reasonable, but then an amount unpaid for more than 30 days, a penalty equal to 5% of the outstanding.
So-
These feel like both of these fees. I feel like the subsection A makes perfect sense. The subsection B feels onerous.
So again, this is a policy decision. This was taken from the gas and diesel taxes, and this is the penalty structure that's in place if a dealer or distributor of gas and diesel. So they report on the 25th of every month what they've sold or distributed during the past 30 days, essentially. And then they have a certain period of time to pay up what's owed on that. And so this is within those, this was designed as a system to keep them current on their payments to the state. Again, this is a policy choice for you. The 1.5% interest is basically the maximum statutory amount of interest. The 5% penalty on top of that is, so that's basically a penalty above and separate from the interest that can come up to a quarter maximum if you remain unpaid for 150 days, come up to a quarter of the amount due. So
This says for 30 days.
yes, so if you read on to the second sentence, the penalty imposed pursuant shall not exceed 25% of the amount of mileage base. So it's for each month until the mileage base user fee is paid in full, you get an additional 5%. And then it caps at 25%. Again, that is a policy choice for you. The language that was put in the original draft just said, what do we do for gas and diesel? Put it in here as a starting point. And that's what this was drafted as, was a starting point based on those tax systems. Again, there are two different types of payers, so you may want to make a different policy choice.
I would suggest either deleting this or making it for more than 6 months, like extending that, because you're already accruing interest in subsection A. Then after 30 days, that feels not right. So either, in my mind, either delete it or make that 6 months. I don't know what other committee members feel. That's my proposal.
So I would support Representative Waite's deletion of section B. It almost seems onerous, and it's a de minimis amount of money that's going to come in regardless. And it will probably result in less admin, although you do it through a computer, I get it. But there's less admin. So it just might be a issue of proportionality and due process to have so much applied to that. But 1.5% is the statutory limit anyway for residential or for consumer interest. So I would just strike it.
I think we'll wait till, and it's gone. We were just talking about taking something out, and I was like, we'll wait until Matt gets back.
Take it
Our
out.
representative are.
Taking something out of the,
Yeah, we're on
The
penalties subsection.
Page 8.
penalties.
so
I mean,
the
if you don't pay, there's a penalty.
right, so there's the way it's set up, there's interest at 1.5% per month that the balance remains past due. And then the penalty that the committee was discussing whether to take out is an additional penalty. If you stay unpaid past 30 days, you get a 5% of the outstanding amount due. plus an additional 5% for each additional month that you're past due until you hit a cap of 25%. So in other words, on top of the 1.5% per month interest, if you remain past due for 5 months, you can have a 25% penalty assessed. So that
Almost as much as your credit card, huh? 25%.
That was agreement. It's a sort of take, or I mean, that's the sentiment so far. Let's take.
I have a question in terms of, so you pay your, I understand where the conversation was at one point, you pay it based on what you drove. In effect, right? You're gonna pay it on what you drove last year. You're gonna settle up and true up based on what you drove.
there's also a pay-as-you-go option that's in this draft.
Okay, but I can pay at the end of the year for everything that I drove. So my $154 on average, 11,000 miles, whatever, that's it, for 100. Maybe you were higher mileage, you might be a couple $100. But if the car is all now becomes battery, it's no longer worth any particular value. Batteries go, and the car is no longer worth anything. I haven't paid my $154. I'm not going to register it again. It's headed junkyard. Is this where this penalty is going to come in if I decide I just don't going to pay it because the car's dead now? Do I get out of paying that last year what it was drove because it's now at the end of its life cycle and
So when you terminate the registration, that's a terminating event, which is supposed to be, there's supposed to be an odometer report at that point where you would have a balance. The way this is worded in here is if you go to there we go, 4307 in here. Right now, the way it's worded is the commissioner may suspend or refuse to renew the registration of an electric vehicle if the commissioner determines following notice and an opportunity for hearing that the owner or lessee has failed to filed a report that it basically is fraudulent or is delinquent at the time of renewal on the payment. Right now, it doesn't address what if you've terminated the registration of that car and gone out and bought a new car, so different vehicle. But you could certainly update that to say that, and the owner or lessee may not register, commissioner can also in their discretion refuse to register a new vehicle for that individual if they still owe an amount. But it's not in the current bill. So there is a bit of a gap there, and it becomes a decision of whether you want to have that out there as a penalty for failing to pay that final amount.
or even if it's not a penalty, but yeah, the amount itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's
But I'm not sure that the ability to not drive again or to not register a vehicle is on par, a reasonable or not penalty for not paying. I'm just saying, it seems like you're paying after the fact. We must have plenty of other things in state government that have a way to collect that money. I don't know what they would be. There must be other events that we could use as a model as to,
There's also a right for the commissioner to take a person to court to collect the amount due. And here there's a civil action. The difficulty with that is the amounts may be small enough that the cost of an attorney filing the case is outweighs the amount that can be recovered. If you're talking about $126 or something like that, that's a half hour of an attorney's time, let alone the court filing costs.
So how would this then interface with the documents that gets generally sent out saying, I'm going to be an actuary or whatever, and not an actuary, but a
executor.
And my taxes are all paid and blah, blah, blah. And you have no, because you haven't paid your MBUF. Those forms I'm talking about.
Yeah, where you have to state that you're in good standing with the state.
Yeah.
It's not addressed in this bill. With the current forms, I'm not sure if this would be covered under the good standing. Oftentimes those will say good standing with respect to like unemployment insurance payments and income and corporate taxes and so forth. This is something separate. There are potential ways to address this in terms of, you know, allowing the commissioner to say you got to come good before you can register a new vehicle, something like that. There are limits to what you can collect. And I'm not sure, you know, Patrick has thoughts on this. I would invite him to weigh in, but I think a lot of it's kind of a policy question, and these are some of the nitty-gritty details that this bill doesn't currently address.
Person what?
I think it's completely reasonable to require a person who is registering a new vehicle who has an unpaid EMBA fee to pay that fee before or at the point of registering a new vehicle.
We'll have to look at, I guess we have pieces that have come up I'm sure all morning that we're looking for you to go back and potentially work together to make more adjustments, I would suspect, or not. You were asking about, I appreciate your comment. I would say that, you know, what concerns me more than anything now is when, you know, we used to loan the kids take the car, they had to bring it back full. Well, guess what? You know, now they don't pay gas money. Now they're going to get out of paying that mileage piece. You know, what are these kids going to learn? You know, they can take the car. I still get it on my bill later on. And, you know, they're still plugging it into my electricity. And those kids aren't paying for anything when they joyride my car 200 or 300 miles. They don't have to pay for anything. That's just, you know, that's just.
I'm sure we're not, they're getting for social issues. It's not appropriate here.
Patrick's going to tell us how he collects the money from his kids?
Yeah.
Is that what you're going to do, Patrick? Tell me how you're going to get the gas money out of your kids for a non-gas car?
They have bikes and they can stay on the bikes because they won't have a car, yeah.
There's a practical person.
Or you could just say, pay up front. Wanted to just ask Damien a question. So to Representative White's point, isn't there already in statute the ability for the commissioner to suspend registration, broadly speaking, for lack of payment?
It's a good question. There is ability to suspend registration. Let me just look.
To suspend or deny registration based on that basis.
Yeah.
On debts owed to the DMV.
If you give me just a second, I'll find that for you.
Also want to just sort of I understand there are going to be some things that come up throughout the implementation of this, but for the vast majority of people, those that are paying as they go, they're not going to fall, you know, behind that much.
Go ahead and instruct them.
Depends, you know, which reporting options they choose. If they pay as you go, they could hypothetically fall behind more. But there is just the reconciliation at the point of registration that's going to take care of the vast majority of these cases where you either pay the balance that's owed or you're not moving on to registration of the vehicle.
To answer Patrick's question about the commissioner's current authority, so the commissioner can suspend or revoke registration of any motor vehicle if the vehicle has been stolen and the registrant doesn't have legal title, if the vehicle is in poor mechanical condition and its operation and use is a menace or danger, the vehicle is operated without proper equipment after the owner has been notified to get that equipment, If the owner perpetrated a fraud on the department, if the owner is a habitual user of alcohol to excess, if the number plates were erroneously issued, if suspension or revocation is authorized under any other provision of law, that's the one that's important. Or if the commercial motor carrier responsible for the safety of the vehicle has been prohibited from operating by a federal agency. And then the commissioner can also deny registration if an applicant fails to disclose material information or has otherwise committed fraud, or if their privilege to operate has been suspended because of DUI, or if they're prohibited from operating by the federal government. That's for commercial carriers. So the suspension or revocation is authorized under any other provision of law. The key there is that if you add in something here where if an individual has a terminating event and then fails to pay the amount due after the terminating event, you can add in language that just says the commissioner is authorized to suspend or revoke registration. If you want to, you could add this language of any other vehicle registered to that individual. But and you could also provide that they can deny it, but that would be a new section. It's not in the current bill. It's not in the current law that I can see.
So I might have to circle back on that, but I think, well, Matt's in there, I make a motion to, remove section B.
Okay.
I think that was a flavor. I think the committee's fine with that. I think we could take that in.
Okay.
And I guess I'd ask the agency to figure out, or whether or not we think we should have some kind of, how they want to cover people that fail to pay their money before they register a vehicle or not, again, if they fail to pay at the end of the life cycle of another. Does that sound right? If they're correct, if we're suggesting another change or not. And then we have what, one more section that's in the big yellow?
Yes. Do you want to keep going?
I'd like to, if that one big section gets us to the end, then we'll take a break before our next piece.
Okay.
That's why there's a big half an hour plus break in there, because I expected that we might be into it. We might still be deep into it. The schedule is fluid.
Okay. So the new proposal here amends. So this is the current infrastructure fee. It was pointed out by the agency that it currently refers to the EV infrastructure fee. It's only going to apply to plug-in hybrid electric vehicles when this takes effect. So the changes here are to delete the EV infrastructure fee. The other change proposed by the agency is deletion of the transfer of the money to ACCD for the EVSE charging ports at workplaces and multi-unit dwellings, and dedicating that money back to the transportation fund for general uses. From my conversations with Patrick, and he can speak to this a bit more because I'm fairly new to this, having only come to it last year, his understanding of the legislative intent was that when MBUF came online, these funds would go back to the general transportation fund rather than being dedicated to the build out of those level 1 and 2 charging ports at workplaces and multi-unit dwellings. But again, that's ultimately, it's a policy decision for you. This is the proposed cleanup here.
With the effective date on that being,
It would be the same as the effective date for the MBUF program, so January 1.
it's not gonna happen
Yeah, so
31st or January or July 1st of 2026, because when the T-bill would be effective, it would be effective January
Yeah.
2027.
yes.
Okay, is that, as long as that's.
I don't think I put that in there.
I don't know if you have to, I just want to be.
Yeah, I
I'm
actually,
okay with going to the T funds early, but I suspect some people might not be.
yeah, I actually don't have effective dates in
Earlier the
this.
better, for my mind.
Yeah.
That does not probably necessarily agree with everyone's.
Yeah,
It may not be the intent of what we had said previously. You know, so I'm just trying to float it out there to those that do have a concern. I'm on board with doing it effective July 31st, 2026, but that is not necessarily the intent of what was originally put in. If anybody wants to comment on that or not, or am I making up something that doesn't exist?
no, the current changes occur whenever the MBUF is implemented. And there's no effective date in here. That said, you're not bound by the intent of the prior legislatures. So if you decide that the T fund needs that money sooner, you could do that effective July 1. And I don't know how much money it would be. That's a question for Logan. But you could end that transfer now. Or, July 1 if you want to.
Sales are up this year, what? Why?
That is
You
true.
want it, so. No, but that might screw up their budget, yeah, I was just.
This is an area that I was thinking you might want to comment on or not. I don't know, I'll prompt you or not. Seems like you may or may not, but this money's going to ACCD right now. Question is,
Yeah.
will be started on July 31st, it starts going to the T fund, or January 1st, 2027, it starts going to the T fund. That's sort of, I guess, the question I'm asking people right now. But Patrick first, and then we'll go.
I was just going to say that, as I understood it, when this first came up in the Senate Transportation Committee, the intent was to have this funding carved out for ACCD's charging program on a temporary basis, and that the battery electric fee would be repealed once a mileage-based user fee was implemented. And then at that point, the revenue from the plug-in hybrids would be flowing back into the transportation fund. So the two were intended, I think, to coincide,
Meaning January 1st, 2027.
meaning what has become January 1st, 2027. But as Damien said, the language was not based on a specific date, just based on implementation of the mileage-based user fee.
Representative Powell?
Yeah, I just assume keep it the same. This is what we sold. And it's not gonna be an awful lot of money, and it's just gonna add, again, more confusing. And the ACCD program, this committee has supported, going forward. We know it'll phase out, but I'm not sure, it's worth, phasing them out necessarily sooner.
Not a big issue. Anybody else have a comment?
I was open to setting this July 1st. We heard some testimony about the ACCD program. It didn't. Yeah, knowing the revenue shortfall in transportation, I'd be supportive of an earlier date, but I don't feel that strongly.
Question, Tom?
I think we need to hear from ACCD. It seemed like they had a lot of demand for this program. It's a pretty small amount of money, so I'd hate to pull the carpet out from under them ahead of what they'd anticipated in terms of when it would transfer over to the T fund. So I don't think I'd support an earlier date at this time without testimony from ACCD on that.
I concur with that, just given the time crunch that we're in, talking about municipal. Just recommendation date, that's.
We'll move on?
Yeah.
All right.
So that is,
Patrick, I'm sorry. You're gonna speak anytime you'd like, sir.
Okay, so I think that aligns with the agency's expectations around what the legislative intent was. And just to give you a sense, sort of the scale, we have about 8,000 registered plug-in hybrids at $44.50. In that 6-month span, if just quick math, it's only 4,000 vehicles that might be subject to it, understanding there's all kinds of things come in at different times on the registration cycle. But it's likely less than $200,000 you're talking about.
The intent, the way it was meant to be. Transition to January 1st, 2027. And changes that, how many different areas of changes are we asking for revised language for the next time we look at this? And do we have policy questions left to decide? I assume we did not decide about the escalator specifically. We didn't vote on that, did we?
No,
We did not, so we still have to decide that. And there's other changes. There's other changes to be made.
So the inflation adjustment still needs to be decided on. The next thing I have is there needs to be a transition section to address currently registered EVs in the initial year of the program. That's not in there. So I will add that. I'm going to adjust the mileage reporting period definition to clear up some confusion. Add in an allowance for newly registered vehicles to go right into the pay-as-you-go program if that program is offered as an option. Delete the 5% monthly penalty. The agency is going to think about a proposal for what to do about someone who fails to pay the final MBUF on an EV after its registration is terminated. And I'll add in a January 1 effective date for the termination of the ACCD transfer and an effective date with applicability language for the actual MBUF program.
Okay. And we will, we're be able to pick this back up in sort of this afternoon's under committee discussions in pieces. We'll pick back up when your availability and Patrick's comes back in this afternoon as we work on the piece. We'll look at that 115 to 245 pieces as we schedule that up. So for we are adjourned until 11 o'clock till we pick up the next